I have experienced something that opened my eyes to the dark side of illness and death. In hospitals, things happen that few can see, but they can determine the fate of a soul. Evil hides where you least expect it, and if you're not careful, it can reach you too. I thank Heaven's Gate for giving me the opportunity to share this truth, and I urge you to stay until the end, because what you will discover could save both your soul and the souls of those you love. My name is Louise, first was you love. My name is Louise, first and you love. My name is Louise, first of Cain and then every stories. First the chipstein stay in need, was lustig slees, but as ditchers totally had nasally or you. My name is Louise, verse 2. I thank Heaven's Gate for you and these. I thank Heaven's Gate for giving me the opportunity to Catholic family immersed from childhood in faith and prayer. I never doubted God nor the necessity of living according to His will. I believed that this was enough to walk in the light, but 2 experiences made me understand that reality is far vaster than we can imagine. 2 visions engraved my destiny, transforming every conviction and dragging me into a war that few see, but which is fought every day in every place. I was 15 when it first happened. I was 15 when it first happened. I was 15 when it first happened. Fear to and spew. Still awake, when suddenly my room dissolved, I found myself in a hospital, a place bathed in a chilly, almost unreal light. The corridor seemed endless, the walls barren, and the air carried a silence that are of death. I looked around, and then I saw them, the patients' bodies worn down by illness, faces marked by suffering. But what paralyzed me was the complete absence of hope in their eyes. No one was praying, no one was calling on God, only fear. Only a silent and desperate, I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt a weight in my chest, a dull pain that did not belong to me but to all of them. And then I woke up with my heart pounding in my chest, my breath short and sweat on my forehead. That night changed something within me. I understood that my place was there among those who struggled between life and death. I had to become a doctor. I had to bring hope to those places, so devoid of God years past. And I pursued my poach's binge. And I pursued my potum abelsti. Putus meas pentudimi. Second vision awaited me ready to shake every certainty I held. I had been studying medicine for a few years. When it happened, I found myself once again in an unfamiliar environment. But this time I was not a spectator, I was the doctor. I wore the white coat, my hands performing a surgical procedure. I felt the steady beat of the monitor, the labored breath of the patient lying on the operating table. Everything seemed normal until I looked up at normal. Until I looked up at his Enabin. That belonged to this world. They moved silently, dark and formless, like spirits without shape. They were everywhere, observing, waiting. I was paralyzed. I tried to speak, to scream, but my voice was stifled as if something were trying to stop me from acting. And then the light, a warm, sudden light that shattered the darkness and made those presences vanish. In that moment, I understood that medicine was not only a matter of science, that scalpel and medicines were not inadded. A deeper and invisible battle fought every day right before our eyes. For years these visions remained within me, guiding me and shaping my vocation, and yet I knew they were not over, and I was right. A few months ago, the last revelation struck me like lightning. This time I was not in a single hospital. I was everywhere. Every corridor, every room, every operating theater was connected by an invisible thread, and there among the patient's beds, among the machines, among the hand, and there among the patient's beds, among the machines, among the hand, and the hand, invisible. Dark presences moving in the shadows, whispering words that no one could hear, waiting for the right moment to snatch away the soul of the weakest of those who had lost their faith, of those who no longer had the strength to fight. In that instant, I understood hospitals were not just places of care, they were battlefields. Battles invisible, fought between forces that most men never suspected existed. When I woke, my body was trembling. I knew it was was waiting for me. And this time, I could no longer ignore it. I continued to be a careful doctor, respectful of science, but I knew that was not enough. There was a deeper battle, an invisible war that was not fought with scalpel and medicines. Just over a month later, during a night shift, I entered the intensive care unit A department. I knew well where patients were suspended between life and death, but that night something was different. I felt an unexplained finding was different. I felt an unexplained that their fault. And that's the dean that explained of an alt tulum. an inexplained between life and death. The monitors emitted their regular rhythm, the subdued lights illuminated the beds, but I had the distinct feeling that we were not alone. While checking a chart, I looked up and saw her, a dark silhouette, motionless next to a bed. My blood turned to ice. She was neither a doctor nor a nurse. I squinted, but in an instant the figure vanished, a trick of the light fatigue. Yet the sense of oppression lingered. I moved closer to the bed, the patient, a 60-year-old Deans. A 60-year-old, as I have the honored us. Signs were stable, but his face was drawn as if he were fighting an invisible battle. I leaned in. I noticed that his eyes, closed for days, were moving rapidly beneath his eyelids, as if tormented by something from which he could not escape. A shiver ran through me. My vision returned to presences in the hospitals. The shadows beside the beds of the ill science spoke of dreams of residual brain activity. But what if that man was not merely suspended between life and death? What if he were? To no one. I knew my colleagues would have considered me a visionary, perhaps a fanatic, but inside the truth was clear. For years I had believed my duty was to cure, to alleviate suffering. Now I knew that my battle had only just begun. That night, I could not sleep. The image of the dark figure, the patient's troubled eyes in his coma, the inexplicable weight on my chest, everything tormented me. But it was not time to stop on one side, medicine with it. Invisible battle that I could no longer ignore. A few days later, and an event marked my life. It was 2 a.m. when I was urgently called to pediatrics. A 1-year and 9-month-old girl had been brought in critical condition after falling into a pool, drowning asphyxia. The paramedics had resuscitated her, but her heart was weak, her body suspended between life and death. I rushed to the emergency on the stretcher. The little one was paid emergency on the stretcher. The little one was paid emergency on the stretcher. The little one was paid to the Indes. Bosom one was paid. Verder emergency on the Pugdun. And the Finland. That is preventing venom, little emergency. I thought in hell one of Spigalipus. Everything, oxygen medications, constant monitoring, yet she worsened minute after minute. It was as if something was holding her back. I tried to focus on the science, but then a nurse whispered, "Doctor, look at the little girl." I looked up and my blood ran cold. The little girl still had her eyes closed, her body motionless, but her face had changed. An expression of pure terror had painted itself across her features, her mouth slightly open as if she were worse chill. Not normal. No patient in such a condition reacted this way. I moved closer, thinking perhaps it was a reflex, an involuntary movement, but deep inside I knew the truth. Suddenly the monitors began beeping, the girl's heartbeat collapsed. The nurses prepared for resuscitation, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. She wasn't just dying, she was fighting. The machines continued beeping in an anguished crescendo as her parameters plummeted relentlessly. The nurses plummeted relentlessly. The nurses, administering adrenaline, increasing oxygen, performing chest compressions, yet nothing seemed to work. I felt sweat trickling down my back, my breath growing, labored not only from the tension of the situation, but from something deeper, an invisible oppression, constricting my chest and making the room's air dense, almost unbreathable. Then I saw her, and an indistinct formless shadow motionless next to the girl's bed, a dark presence that no one else seemed. Waiting, my heart raced, and for a moment I felt paralyzed, torn between the terror of what I was witnessing and the rationality that demanded I focus on the science and the maneuvers that might save that fragile life. Yet I knew it was not merely a medical crisis, not simply a cardiac arrest. There was something else, something that did not belong to the visible world, a force that seemed determined to keep that little girl trapped between life and death. As Guy began to pray inwardly, silently, without uttering a sound, and I was still diverting my hands from what needed to be done in silence. With my heart pounding, I invoked the name of Jesus, asking for his presence, his intervention, his light in that room, suffocating with shadow. Every beat of my heart became a plea, every breath a call to his authority. And the more I prayed, the more I felt something shift, as if an invisible weight were beginning to lift. Then it happened. The invisible weight were beginning to lift. Then it happened. It happened. That I'm not the first thing the word gives you to learn. Vera, because the more did it is on your name as you speak. Then it happened. Been tracing an almost flat line. Suddenly registered a beat, then another and another weak irregular. But present the nurses paused for a moment, incredulous, then resumed their work with renewed hope, while inside me a certainty took hold, unshakable and absolute. It hadn't been just a coincidence, nor was it only the work of medicine. Something had tried to take that little girl away, but it had failed. The room seemed lighter. The oppression vanished. The shadow way. Oppression vanished. The shadow way. Fortune vanished. The shadow way with brother vanished. Last time I knew the battle was not over. I left the room with a heavy heart, unable to shake the feeling that the presence hadn't truly departed. As I walked down the corridor, illuminated by cold artificial light, I tried to rationalize to convince myself that it was only fatigue, that my mind was conjuring non-existent connections. But deep inside, I knew the truth. It wasn't over the next day while reviewing some clinical charts in my office. A call from, some clinical charts in my office. A call from, eliminated. Reading some clinical charts in my office. A call from, a call from the extension charts in my office. A call from the news that you need. While lava viewings. Girl was improving rapidly her parameter. Clearly recovering, her breathing more stable, yet something was troubling the nurses. When I asked for an explanation, the voice on the other end hesitated before replying, "It's the grandmother. She's been here since this morning." A seemingly innocuous phrase, but the nurse's tone put me on alert. "What do you mean?" I asked, striving to remain calm. After a brief pause, the reply came in a lower, uncertain tone. "She arrived without warning. She insisted on being alone with She insisted on being alone with this tune, with the tune nodding. With the Guinness resisting, with alone with the Galaxy, with two invalidices, with being alone with the whisker, the tune of being you asked. She insisted on being alone with the tune, with the two invalidices. Found her with a yellow handkerchief draped over the child, whispering something under her breath. A shiver ran down my spine. "Where is she now?" I asked. "She's still there with the little one. We don't know if we should intervene." I sprang to my feet, my heart racing as I left my office with determined steps. Every fiber of my being urged me to reach that room as soon as possible. When I reached the pediatric ward and opened the door, my gaze immediately fell on the woman. She immediately fell on the woman. She, tightly gripping the delicate wrist of her granddaughter. Her clothes were simple, yet there was something unsettling about her. Her face was tense, her gaze fixed on the little girl's motionless body, as if she saw something others could not perceive. I advanced cautiously, studying the scene. The little girl, who until a few hours earlier had seemed to be recovering, now looked pale once again. Her breathing barely perceptible. It was as if she were slipping back into a struggle I had witnessed the night before. The woman lifted her eyes and met my gaze instantly. I felt an overwhelming discomfort, an inexplicable chill that shot through my body. Her eyes were unnervingly fixed, as if she were scrutinizing me. After a moment of silence, her low, almost whisper-like voice broke the tension. "Doctor, don't worry, I'm only protecting my granddaughter." Those words should have reassured me, but the tone in which they were spoken had the ought. The yellow handkerchief still clutched in her hand, a worn fabric that seemed imbued with something indefinable. I took a deep breath, striving to maintain control. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but for now the little girl only needs medical care. We should let her rest." The woman stared at me for a long moment, then rose with a slow, almost unnatural movement, as if she were not the least bit disturbed by my presence. Her gaze remained fixed on me, as she fixed on me, as she fixed on me, as she inserted in the football. Her gaze remained fixed on me as she fixed on for the sleets when this team to in. Still Solnanders deems to get this keep it school into her bag. Then, with a barely perceptible smile, she uttered words that made my blood run cold. "You see, don't you?" I stood motionless, my heart seeming to stop for a moment. She said nothing more without taking her eyes off mine. She turned and left the room, leaving me there alone beside the little girl, still marked by an unsettling tension. I knew that this woman was not there solely out of love for her granddaughter. She knew something, and above all, she knew of me. I stayed on his bedside, my breathing still uneven after the encounter with her grandmother. Those words, "you see, don't you?" continued to echo in my mind, laden with a meaning that still eluded me. I looked at the small body on the bed. It was stable, yet its face lacked the serenity of one who is recovering. Its clenched fists seemed to hold an invisible tension, as if even in sleep it remained alert. Then I noticed the mark on the wrist, exactly where the woman had. I noticed the mark on the wrist, exactly where the woman had. The center, almost like a subtle burn, I gently touched that strange trace, feeling that the skin was warmer than the surrounding area. I took a wad of damp cotton and tried to clean it, but the mark remained as if engraved beneath the skin rather than on its surface. The little girl moved a slight, almost imperceptible tremor, yet enough to make me hold my breath. Her lips tightened, her body gave a small spasm, as if she were experiencing a pain that dance. At badida da sklisna. Dat tiba experiencing a pain that living as it youth. Her is yosks, ratalikin that taking now. Searched the room for a nurse, someone to confirm what I was witnessing, but the room was empty. I was alone with her, and with the weight of what I felt growing within me, running a hand through my hair. I tried to rationalize things scientifically. There's always an explanation. Yet the more I observed the mark, the more I sensed that medicine alone could not explain what was happening. I turned toward the door, wondering if the grandmother had truly left, or if she was a Zeus. Signals on a horseshoe's less. Shadows, leaving behind something unfinished. I looked again at the small mark on the little girl's wrist. It wasn't just a bruise, it was a brand, and I knew that the battle was not over. For the first time in my career, I was certain that the true enemy was not a disease. It was something far darker. I returned to the girl, noticing that the mark on her wrist was fading, yet her face remained tense as if the battle were not yet over. Soon after, a nurse enforcing Aremphus. Attempting to enter the room, I immediately made my way to the head nurse's office, where I found her waiting for me. Her gaze was calm, yet laden with something dark. "You don't understand, doctor. I must see her," she said. I maintained my composure and explained that the little girl was improving and that the grandmother needed to leave, but her voice deepened. Her tone grew more unsettling. "Evil does not vanish just because you wish it away." A shiver ran down my spine, yet I tried to remain rational. I believe, les superstitions. She smiled, a cold smile. If that were so, then why did the shadows continue to follow her? Those words struck me more deeply than I cared to admit, but I stood firm. I told her she would no longer be allowed in the hospital. The head nurse confirmed that if she persisted, we would call security. The woman did not protest. She turned and slowly walked away unhurriedly, as if she knew that her departure would change nothing. I returned to the room, finally steady. Perhaps this battle had been won, yet I knew it was not the end. The child's breathing was finally calm. The unnatural pallor vanished, yet deep within I sensed it. It was not over. The unsettling presence of the grandmother, her all-too-aware gaze, those words still echoing in my mind. "Evil does not vanish just because you wish it away," left me with a suspended sense of expectancy, as if something greater were lurking, ready to manifest. I didn't. Received a call in the dead of night. On the other end of the line was a voice broken by despair. The mother of a childhood friend, her daughter, had been admitted in a coma, and the doctors had lost all hope. "Please come, she's dying." My first instinct was to refuse. What could I do that medicine hadn't already attempted? But I felt something inside me, an inexplicable urge, a certainty that was not my own. I had to go. When I arrived at the hospital, the air was when I arrived at the hospital, the air was the air was in his, where's Bilstrinus, was Bastran's tea, Veffelstuples, was clean, Pictusnus the air. When I arrived at the hospital, the air was not the other hospital. The air was near led to the room. Clara, my friend, lay motionless on the bed. Her breathing faint, the machines recording a life hanging by a thread. Her skin was pale, her eyes closed as if sealed by an invisible force. It wasn't just a coma, something held her captive. Then a voice within me spoke, "Position yourself to the right of her head and do not move without hesitation." I obeyed. I felt a wave of chills run through my skin. A silent warning there was something in that room. At first, she appeared to be an ordinary presence, busy arranging instruments by the bed, but then I observed her more closely. Her movements were too slow, too fluid, as if she were following an invisible rhythm. Her hands moved with precise gestures, as if drawing symbols in the air that only she could see. Her face was devoid of emotion, her eyes fixed on Clara. I realized she was not there to heal something. In my spirit warned me with force. She was perforce, she was perforce. Again slow. No, I knew what was happening. This was a battle for her soul. I felt fear trying to immobilize me, but at that very moment, the door opened and a woman entered. She was a believer, one who understood what was happening. She looked at me and nodded. She knew without wasting a second. We began to sing. We declared the victory of Christ. The name of Jesus filled the room, shattering the suffocating silence. The nurse stiffened, her previously impasse. Into a grimace of anger, she took a step back. Then another. The monitor registered a slight increase in Clara's vital signs. The battle was underway. The woman continued to sing with strength, while I proclaimed life for my friend. The atmosphere in the room changed. The air grew lighter, and gradually the tension that had oppressed me began to fade. The nurse recoiled, as if struck by something. Then, without uttering a word, she spun around and left the room at a brisk pace. Corridor. No sooner had she gone than Clara's eyes flew open. For a moment she lay still, her breathing uncertain. Then I saw her blink, look around in confusion. She was back. Her mother broke down in tears. I took a step back, my heart still pounding in my chest, aware of a truth I could no longer ignore. I had seen darkness up close. I had felt its presence. This experience taught me that evil does not always manifest in obvious forms. Sometimes it hides behind the hide. Provide care and comfort. Even a nurse, a figure of help and healing, can become a conduit for something dark if she opens herself to forces that do not belong to the light. We cannot assume that everyone who works in hospitals has only the patient's best interests at heart. Some knowingly or unknowingly may become instruments of a power that operates in the shadows, influencing the mind, the body, and even the soul of the most vulnerable. For this reason, discern and not to underestimate. The spiritual battle can take place anywhere, even in the places where we least expect it over the years. I have experienced many similar events, and I have learned that these dark presences manifest more intensely around those at the brink of death. They do not always come from strangers, from nurses, or ambiguous figures. Very often they are generated by the very family members surrounding the patient. Fatigue, despair, resentment can transform. Fatigue, despair, resentment can transform. Transform and can transform, but change. That is being the changes. As we have written, and no hair again. Very funny train with here for numbers, and I come out at a vanagekins for non-living for dozens. They are not ready to come from strangers surrounding the patient for sick. Relatives who, even without realizing it, projected negative energy onto the patient, as if their exasperation and desire to end the suffering materialized into real forces, into shadows that fed on that emotion. And I have learned to see them. I have learned to recognize them in fleeting glances, in words spoken with too much resignation, in silences laden with an invisible weight. I have seen patients deteriorate not solely because of their condition, but solely because of their condition, but soul yet around them, almost pushing them to give up. I have seen people wither, not only because of the disease, but because someone close to them was slowly extinguishing their spirit without even realizing it. And I have learned to drive them away. You cannot simply tell a son, a spouse, a sibling, you are the problem, but you can protect the patient. You can break that toxic bond without the other person even realizing it, helping the weak to find the light again without other person even realizing it, helping the weak to find the light again without the weak to just lost in their own despair. I have lived through difficult, heartbreaking situations, battles fought invisibly in the silent wards of hospitals, in rooms where the boundary between life and death is so thin that something always tries to cross it. I have seen the presence of evil disguised as resignation, as worry, as sickly affection, and I have seen that few notice it. That is why I now leave you with this urgent message. Never underestimate the weight of your emotions. You are near someone who is suffering pain. Fatigue and fear can transform into something much larger than you, becoming open doors for forces. You do not understand. Evil does not always manifest in an obvious way. It does not need extreme gestures or dark rituals to insinuate itself into people's lives. Sometimes it is subtle, hiding in the shadows of resignation, feeding on the sighs of those who no longer see hope, growing in the indifference of those who are. You are with someone who is ill, fragile, teetering on the edge between life and death. Pay attention to what you bring into their room, into their days, into their final moments. Do not unload your frustration on them. Do not let your exhaustion become a weight that pushes them further down. Do not allow your pain to become the shadow that envelops them. What you think, what you feel, what you secretly desire in your heart has power. If you leave room within yourself for resigner in yourself, for resigner, virtus to meiner. Resigner is resigner, leave room within yourself. For resigner is each how resigner you diesen to thought that that person is already lost, then you are ceding ground. And if there is something waiting in the darkness, it will not hesitate to claim. If you delight even in suffering, even when the weight seems unbearable, choose to be a reflection of hope, of true love, of peace. For evil cannot take root where there is light. It cannot remain where there are those who choose to fight with faith, with strength, with truth. If we do not recognize it in time, evil can take much more than weight. In time, evil can take much more than weight, can take much more than weight, can take much more than what you do now. Steal a soul, extinguish a life before its time, trap the suffering in something far deeper than illness. But if we know how to see it, if we know how to resist it, if we choose not to give it space, then we can stop it. And this battle, which many ignore, is more real than you might believe. If you've made it this far, and believe this story must be heard, let me know by commenting below and tell me which country you're listening from. But most importantly, don't stay. See this reasons today can save those you love. Share this story with as many people as possible. Family, friends, anyone who needs to know the truth, do it for them before it's too late, before you go. I need to ask you something important. We live in a world full of information on how to live better, but how many of these truly help us secure our place in eternity? The guide, How to Secure Your Place in the Kingdom of Heaven and Avoid Hell, offers you a clear and practical path to hoard eternal peace. With exclusive bonuses like the prayer journal and Christian coloring pages, you'll have everything you need to strengthen your faith and live it today with serenity. Take advantage of the special launch week offer. After that, the price will double. Over 100 people have already taken this opportunity, and now they know exactly how to live. Moving forward to finding peace and sleeping soundly. Click the link in the description and start your journey. Journey.